All right. So here we go. We're going to start making our way into session 13 this week. It might take 2 weeks, as I mentioned earlier, but we'll just see. BJ was mentioning she really enjoyed this session. I remember this session being really interesting, kind of like refocusing, recalibrating point in the material. So yeah, let's get into it. Anybody feel like reading? Anyone want to start?
I'll start. Okay. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. First thing I would like to do is apologize for the stupid questions that I've asked while searching for what we should do. I consider what we are doing a great honor and privilege to be also humble messengers of the law of one. And at this time believe that the way to prepare this book is to start at the beginning of creation, following the evolution of man and the evolution of man on earth to the best of my inaudible at all times, investigating how the law of one was used inaudible. I think also that I need to finish the book. Let the material that we have already carry the end of the book inaudible. I would also suggest the title of the book, The Law of One. I'd like to state as the author, Ra. Would you agree to this? I am Ra. Your query is unclear. Would you please state as separate queries each area of agreement? Questioner, first, I'd like to start at the beginning of creation, as far back as we can go, and follow the development of man to the present time. Is this agreeable? I'm Rob. This is completely your discernment, understanding, decision. Questioner. Secondly, I would like to title the book The Law of One by Ra. Is this agreeable? I am Ra. The title of the book is acceptable. The authorship by Vibratory Sound Complex Ra is, in our distortion of understanding, incomplete. We are messengers. Questioner. Can you state who then should author the book? Ra. I can only request that if your discernment understanding suggests the use of this vibratory sound complex Ra, the phrase an humble messenger of the law of one be appended. Questioner, thank you. Can you tell me of the earliest first known thing in the creation? I am Ra. The first known thing in the creation is infinity. The infinity is creation. Questioner, from this infinity then must have come what we experience as creation. What was the next step or the next evolvement? I am Ra. Infinity became aware. This was the next step. Questioner, after this, what happened? Ra. Awareness led to the focus of infinity into infinite energy. You've called this by various vibrational sound complexes, the most common to your ears being logos or love. The creator is the focusing of infinity as an aware or conscious principle called by us as closely as we can create understanding learning in your language. Intelligent infinity. Questioner, can you state the next step? Ra. The next step is still at this space-time nexus in your illusion, achieving its progression as you may see it in your illusion. The next step is an infinite reaction to the creative principle following the law of one in one of its primal distortions, freedom of will. Thus, many, many dimensions, infinite in number, are possible. The energy moves from the intelligent infinity due first to the outpouring of randomized creative force. This then creating patterns which in holographic style appear as the entire creation, no matter which direction or energy is explored. These patterns of energy begin then to regularize their own local, shall we say, rhythms and fields of energy, thus creating dimensions and universes.
Maybe one more.
Questioner. Sorry, I was going back to reread that. Questioner. Then can you tell me how the galaxy and this planetary system were formed? I am Ra. You must imagine a great leap of thought in this query, for at the last query, the physical, as you call it, universes were not yet born. The energies moved in increasingly intelligent patterns until the individualization of various energies emanating from the creative principle of intelligent infinity became such as to be co-creators. Thus, the so-called physical matter began. The concept of light is instrumental in grasping this great leap of thought, as the vibrational distortion of infinity is the building block of that which is known as matter, the light being intelligent and full of energy, thus being the first distortion of intelligent infinity, which was called by the creative principle. This light of love was made to have in its occurrences of being certain characteristics, among them the infinite whole paradoxically described by the straight line, as you would call it. This paradox is responsible for the shape of the various physical illusion entities you call solar systems, galaxies, and planets, all revolving and tending towards the lenticular.
Great.
Do you want me to keep going, or
No, let's pause there. That's plenty to chew on for now.
Okay.
So this is Genesis. This is the creation story as told by Ra.
Yeah.
And it's deep. This is the deepest of waters. How does God create everything? Yeah. So what do
Okay,
y'all?
here's my retelling.
Okay.
I don't know if this is helpful for everybody, but it is for me. There's infinity. Then infinity became aware. Then infinity finds focus. And that's a way of describing that is the logos or love. And then the next step is free will. Is that right?
I don't think so. Free will is the first distortion before the
Yeah.
logos.
Well, I just read it in order.
Okay.
Infinity finds focus.
Mhm.
And they said they call that logos or love.
Mhm.
And then the next step is the freedom of will. Anyway, it does seem backwards to me as well that was the first distortion is free will and the second distortion is love. But they did say it in that order.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, some of the sentences that they use to describe these very subtle dynamics are not, you kind of have to unpack them a bit. I see what you're saying, BJ, but I'm not sure that I translate that sentence to mean what you're saying that it means. But maybe. Yuri, what do you got?
I'm curious, what does it mean that infinity became aware? Any ideas?
And one of the things that I've never considered that was brought about in the book, the one is that in a timeless state there's no change. It's time is literally a measurement of change. That is the purpose of time. So when there's no time, you are in a state of no change. So in the original infinite state, there's no time or space. Space is a relationship between things. So there's neither relationship between things nor change. And from that perspective, from that point, something happened in which there is now. I don't think you can focus in that perspective. I don't think there's a way, like if you're everything and there's nothing else and nothing's changing, what is there to focus on? I think the act of focusing is the very act of focusing would create some sort of something to focus on, right? Like you can't focus on anything if there's no space. So that in itself would initiate a big bang, because now there are things to focus on. Which also, like, this goes back to the order, like what you said, BJ and Aaron, like, yeah, like why in this passage does Ra say focus first when confusion is supposed to be the first distortion? Or maybe I don't know, ordering is weird. Maybe they happen at the same time, because once you have, I interpret the law of confusion, the law of free will, as the creation of perspective, of now there are multiple perspectives of the one creator. There's manyness coming from one. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's okay not to know. I mean, obviously I don't need to, you all know that, but like I don't think we're gonna like walk away from the session being like, oh yeah, now I really get what infinity is or whatever. But it's so good, in my opinion, to reach into these concepts and really try to like find how they live in us, like how we're a part of it all, like right now. Anyway, BJ, go ahead.
I have a couple things to say. One is, I don't think I have really a definition or an answer for you, Yuri, in terms of what does that mean, infinity became aware. But to me, that's a really powerful meditation. Like that's something that I've sat with before. Like, what is awareness? And there's a whole lot of insights that can come from that. That's like, okay, what would it be like if I wasn't aware of that? Like I'm looking at a tree out my window, but I'm not aware of the tree. And then awareness comes in. Now I'm aware of the tree. What's the difference? And just like lots of different ways to like become aware of awareness and get really curious about awareness. And to me, that's really profound. And a lot of insights have come from that. So I don't really have a definition or necessarily like something to say about what I think that means. But I also think that it's a really juicy question. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I wanted to say is related to what Shang said. Like, if there's no focus, I don't remember how you said it. If there's no
Space or time, there's nothing to focus on, because there's nothing. You're everything.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is something that Rupert Spira talks about sometimes. Like, why does infinite consciousness limit itself? And there's a sort of experiential exercise that he walks people through sometimes. It's like, if I was seeing exactly what I'm seeing, combined with exactly what Shang's seeing, combined with exactly what Yuri's seeing, combined with exactly what Aaron's seeing, combined with if all of these layers of seeing were added onto each other, it would just be jumble. And if you add everything, every possible perspective, on top of each other, and you're seeing all perspectives all at once, it is just all blackness. Like there's not any sense to be made of anything. Like if you see everything all at once, it's unintelligible. And to me, that's also been a helpful exercise to like, to go like, oh, that's the purpose of being able to focus. Being able to focus one's awareness is to be able to differentiate and separate and understand the patterns of the universe in a different way. Like, here's the patterns of the universe as expressed as a tree, and here's the patterns of the universe as expressed as a cloud, and as a hand, and as a box, and as a book. And anyway, so yeah, I just want to chime that piece in too, that's like, it's helpful to have one focus of awareness.
You ready? Did you have a follow-up to that?
I have some ideas. So we call the first distortion the free will, and what I think is that becoming aware is a first distortion. Like before, there was no awareness, and once awareness came up, then the fact of this awareness is a first distortion, which makes possible creation of, or not creation, but focusing of infinite energy into law or logos, which is the second distortion. That's what I think. And then like later, this free will brought to existence different forms of creations, like galaxies and planets and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the interesting thing here that stands out. One of the things that stands out to me is that it takes a few steps in Ra's telling of the beginning of everything. It takes a few steps before there is even anything that we would call the universe or the creation. There's a few steps between, like when intelligent infinity moves from being undivided and not yet aware to get to the point where we actually have, like, the Big Bang is one we could call it. Or we have, the generation of the universe or galaxies or light. There's a few steps in between. And those steps are pretty key, like what's going on there. And the way that I'll just share my, how I've been pondering this for years, and it's central to the whole teaching. So, obviously it comes up a lot. And what the metaphor that I use to try to like clothe these steps in meaning, in a way that I can communicate or like make sense of, is that like infinity is the mystery. There's nothing you could say about infinity to make any sense of it. It includes all qualities. It includes all power. It includes all idea. It includes all potential locations in space and time. It includes everything. There's nothing you can really say about it. There's nothing you can really know about it. I mean, infinity in and of itself, meditating on infinity is incredibly profound in my experience. So to move from that state of containing everything, that's the potential for everything, to get from there to the point where you can create, the creator had to kind of generate some context for it to have relationship, for it to select something from the infinite potential of what is contained within itself, to select portions of it to experience, to select portions of it to generate, to select portions of it to create. So it's like the first step, awareness, is almost like the generation of consciousness or something. It's like the generation of the invisible, non-physical matrix that we're experiencing right now, we call awareness, which is the shared field that everything that we are, that we are experiencing or we could ever experience arises within. So that's awareness. That's the first step, which is also free will. But free will is just like, it's like the infinite creator moving from like infinite potential into sort of like a posture of being ready to create something. It hasn't created anything yet, but it's like, okay, now I'm ready to choose. And the second step is choosing something. The second distortion is choosing, like the logos or love is sort of like, I think it means like the creator choosing something to create. It's like, what is it interested in at that level? And so a logos is sort of like a representative of the infinite creator that has selected something from infinity that it wants to steward. It wants to explore. I think that's the second step. And then light, the third step, is like the beginning of the creation of the context for it to create an experience and explore that thing, whatever it is. Anyway, so that's my sort of retelling of the first 3 steps. And this, this material and this telling, it's really juicy. And in 13.8, when Ra talks about light and light being a key to understanding this whole process, I'm telling you, like, studying the secret of light is, it's really, I feel like it's a fascinating and helpful cross. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But Shang, when you were saying like having the book that you just read, and the Law of One, and being able to sort of like let those 2 bodies of work like work you, by reading them both and like figuring out like what are they saying that's the same, or are they different? That's a really, really powerful and helpful thing to do. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit what we're doing with the study of the secret of light and comparing it to this. And I feel like I don't want to talk too much about the secret of light here because we're studying the Law of One, but there's a lot from that material that is helpful for me to make sense of these primal distortions as well. Nia.
Has her hands up.
So tying some of these together, like you said, we don't want to talk too much about Secret of Light, but we're doing that book study to kind of marry the ideas and crossover with the Law of One and the Secret of Light. Also, I like Shang, I'm gonna look at the one that's on my book list. It's in my top like 3 to 4 that I'm planning on getting to next. I want to dive into that because I geek out on that as well. So free will, it has the one infinite creator, before it even created, had an awareness, and boom, there is the co-creators though. And here's where I get a little jumbled in the steps, because I want to know more about the co-creators. And then we have like our central sun and logos, and then our sub logos, and then, and I'm like, hold on, I want to rewind to like what was right past, like right next to, because we were talking about, the reason I'm bringing up the Secret of Light is you had mentioned with Walter Russell's The Divine Iliad, we were discussing what is the source that Walter is communing with when he had that 40-day or 39-day, download and transmission. Because I think you had said something along the lines of the one infinite creator itself is unlikely to be the source, because infinite energy is not involved. It's put that sort of in the hands of the co-creators, and then so the co-creators are before the central sun logos, or was that, I feel like there's co-creators as an in-between. This is where my mind is having a little bit, and I've gone in the search, and I've gone to look at, I've read it several times, and I'm still not able to be like, okay, here's A, B, C, and D in order. It feels a little jumbled, and I'm geeking out on the co-creator part here. Before there's, light being helpers of different densities helping, and we're all when we're not in third density, we're so one with the creator that we are waiting in line to have the veil of forgetfulness and confusion, just so we can experience duality and experience these things, because when we're in 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th density, we're so close to creator that we don't have the desire and push and catalyst to grow and to force growth and change and learning within ourselves. It's slow going. And so all of those are tied, to me, they're all kind of tied together. And I still want to know, I still chew on where Walter was, what Walter was communing with to get that. And then I'm like, I want to geek out on the co-creators, y'all. Like that piece for me is huge. That's I want more info on that specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can go back and read that part again, Nia, and just unpack it. And we can even go back and read from the beginning again. This is, I feel like it's this Genesis point that we're talking about now is like it's the beginning of the whole creation, as Ra tells it. It's worth spending some time on. So I'd be fine to go back and read it.
I mean, this would be a great flow chart to be like,
Yeah,
okay, here's the breakdown, you know,
right.
and then the octaves, and then when we fold back in, and it just keeps going.
Right. I do want to, one thing comes to mind to share though, just in response to the prompt of, okay, so what is this co-creators thing? I think it relates to when they talk about the holographic principle. They talk about I can't find that plus, but they say that there's a holographic nature to creation.
13.8.
13.8. And I think co-creators and logoi is tightly bundled with that holographic principle. Like logoi, we know that logoi are fractal. Like I feel like that's almost a window or a doorway into understanding this is like, okay, if you can understand that a logos creates a galaxy, and then that galactic creator kind of like bifurcates itself into all these sub-creators, co-creators that create solar systems, and those solar systems create, they bifurcate and create souls or mind, body, spirit complexes that then create lives and create, whatever. So if you can get that, which is I think is fairly graspable, you can get that it's like it's a holographic principle. The logos itself is a holographic principle, and this co-creatorship, it's like it's such a paradox because co means multiple or many, but there's only one. But there needs to be some way. I mean, everything we're talking about here is like, how does this infinite one create the context where it can have the experience of manyness, where it can have the experience of people to relate with? It can have the experience of being able to create many different things. And that's the big central kind of like part of the mystery of this whole process, I think.
I have some stuff to add here.
Yeah.
So in the book, The One, they distinguish between the bird's eye view and the frog's view. So the bird view is looking from the whole, and the frog's view is when you're looking up from the bottom. And the bird's view and the frog's view are distinctly different in that there are properties that exist in one but not the other. So for example, space and time exist from the frog's view, but they don't exist from the bird's view. This is like mathematically proven that like some of it goes beyond me, but like they've demonstrated this with particles as well, and that like when you look at a particle, it's just a particle. But when you look at it from inside the particle and start doing calculations from like the subparticles in the particles, suddenly the subparticles have new characteristics that the big particle doesn't have. So in a way, going down adds things. So applying this to this situation, the idea is that when you're in the perspective of the one infinite creator, there's no space or time. Space and time begin to exist when you take a perspective within space and time. Sorry, within when you are a perspective that is not the whole creator looking outwards, suddenly space and time begin to exist. So that creates space and time, that creates existence. And now the question is, well, what is a perspective? Like, what is a perspective that would create this space and time? And I think that is the definition here of co-creator. So I think this is still an unanswered, I'm pretty sure this is still an unanswered question in physics. In that, like, what is a perspective? This is an important question in physics because there's a concept of wave particle collapse, which is like everything is both a wave and a particle, but it's not until you look at it that it picks a space. This is like the famous experiment of like the double slit experiment, where like it's a wave until you look, like it's passing through both slits until you actually measure it, and then when you measure it, it's suddenly passing through one. So like it's the active conscious perspective that creates this. And I think the question is, nobody knows what defines perspective. Like, is a microscope a perspective? Is it the human that creates a perspective? Like, what is it? Like, what is doing that measurement? And that's the law of one talks about two things that I think are important. One is like, I think Ross says the most basic unit of consciousness is the hydrogen atom. I think that is the requirement to enter first density, which is existence. And I think that has something to do with becoming conscious enough where you can have a perspective and interact with the universe in a way that causes matter to exist. And two, I think that's also related to this idea of being a co-creator, and that like you have formed a perspective in which when you interact, it actually creates space and time in a way where it is creating the universe, the physical universe.
I love that. Thank you for that. I got bells going off here. I'm gonna definitely be meditating on that, because I was thinking the double slit experiment too the whole time. But it didn't occur to me that potentiates a co-creator. Just like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to witness it, does it make a sound? And people are like, well, yeah, physics shows that that's the laws of it. It's going to make a sound whether you see it or not. Aha. But then we have the double slit experiment. And so that's a whole mind-blowing opening of perspective as well. And I like that. I had always called it the worm's eye view, and the bird's eye view. I'm definitely reading this book. Thank you. But yeah, that's a huge pondering, to be like, the double slit experiment is a perfect example of anything being a witness to the duality of existence, being a co-creator. That's massive. Thank you for that. Because I always I had this, because I watch all the documentaries on physics, and then it's like the law of everything and nothing, and the Nassim Haramein and all that, I geek out on that stuff. And you take the zoomed out picture, and you take a zoomed out picture, and you zoom out, and you just keep going, and then you have there's still the fractal clusters of galaxies and webs, and there's webs of galaxies, and it keeps going. But yeah, I lost it. I've got too much. Thank you. That was awesome though.
BJ?
Yeah, I just want to say, in response to going back and reading that piece again, I think it would be more helpful to keep going, because they kind of go over the same stuff again, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And then potentially doing session 13 again, like the whole thing again next week. I'd be into that. Like, cover it and then cover it again. That'd be cool. But anyway, just my thought about going back. I think it would be more helpful to keep going and then potentially go back after that.
Okay. Well, we can see how it goes. We all learn differently, and we're all going to relate to and absorb this material in different ways and in a different, kind of cadence. But what I find for myself, and I think this is also, I've heard this from other people too, is that like the first time through the concepts like this we're covering and discussing today, it's not necessarily all just going to click and find schema and find like full understanding and illumination within your own consciousness immediately. It may, but it might not. But as we start to like consider it and contemplate it and meditate on it and think on it, and then go through our lives, either other things we hear or just the sort of like the ripening process of how consciousness works, the insight comes when it comes. It comes naturally when it comes. Sometimes you just need to let it, this is true for me, just let it be. and then the insight will come to you when it's ripe, you know, and it comes from the other side of the veil. I think it comes from our own subconscious or unconscious mind. It comes from the, you know, it comes from the part of ourselves where we do know everything, because we're still part of it all. So anyway, my point there is that we could read this, we could choose to read this 10 times so we really get it, but it doesn't work that way. You know, sometimes you just have to like take it in, let it sit there, and the insights will come when they come. Anyway, and I'm happy to proceed in the best way that works for everyone. But that's my perspective on it. Oh, and then I just want, real quick, I just wanted to say, Shang, I think Ra says that the photon is the primary unit of consciousness, the most basic and fundamental unit of consciousness, not the hydrogen atom. I might be wrong about that, but that's what I think I remember them saying. And then there was one more thing that you said that I wanted to respond to, but I can't remember it, so I'll leave it for now. But let's keep reading per BJ's suggestion. Anybody want to, BJ, you want to read?
Sure.
Yeah, you're right. Photon. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we're on 1310, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right.
Questioner, I think I made an error in asking that question, getting ahead of the process that you were describing. Would it be helpful to fill in that giant leap, or that great leap that I mistakenly made? I am Ra. I attempted to bridge the gap. However, you may question me in any manner you deem appropriate. Questioner, could you tell me, taking the question previous to the one that I asked about galaxies and about galaxy and planets, would you tell me the next step that occurred after that step? I am Ra. The steps, as you call them, are, at the point of question, simultaneous and infinite. Questioner, could you tell me how intelligent infinity became, shall we say, I'm having difficulty with some of the language, how intelligent infinity became individualized from itself? I am Ra. This is an appropriate question. The intelligent infinity discerned a concept. This concept was discerned due to freedom of will of awareness. This concept was finity. This was the first and primal paradox or distortion of the law of one. Thus, the one intelligent infinity invested itself in an exploration of manyness. Due to the infinite possibilities of intelligent infinity, there is no ending to manyness. The exploration, thus, is free to continue infinitely in an eternal present. Questioner, was the galaxy that we are in created by the infinite intelligence, or was it created by a portion of the individualized infinite intelligence? I am Ra. The galaxy and all other things of material of which you are aware are products of individualized portions of intelligent infinity. As each exploration began, it in turn found its focus and became co-creator. Using intelligent infinity, each portion created an universe, and allowing the rhythms of free choice to flow, playing with the infinite spectrum of possibilities, each individualized portion channeled the love light into what you might call intelligent energy, thus creating the so-called natural laws of any particular universe. Each universe, in turn, individualized to a focus, becoming, in turn, co-creator, and allowing further diversity, thus creating further intelligent energies, regularizing or causing natural laws to appear in the vibrational patterns of what you would call a solar system. Thus, each solar system has its own, shall we say, local coordinate system of illusory natural laws. It shall be understood that any portion, no matter how small, of any density or any illusory pattern contains, as in an holographic picture, the one creator, which is infinity. Thus all begins and ends in mystery. Questioner, could you tell me how the individualized portion of intelligent infinity created our galaxy, inaudible, that the same portion created our planetary system, and if so, how this came about? I am Ra. We may have misperceived your query. We were under the distortion impression that we had responded to this particular query. Would you restate the query? Questioner. Primarily then, how shall we say, the planetary system that we are in now evolved? Was it all created at once, or was there first our sun created and this inaudible was created? I am Ra. The process is from the larger in your illusion to the smaller. Thus, the co-creator, individualizing the galaxy, created energy patterns which then focused in multitudinous focuses of further conscious awareness of intelligent infinity. Thus, the solar system of which you experience inhabitation is of its own patterns, rhythms, and so-called natural laws, which are unique to itself. However, the progression is from the galaxy spiraling energy to the solar spiraling energy to the planetary spiraling energy to the experiential circumstances of spiraling energy, which begin the first density of awareness or consciousness of planetary entities. Well, I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, that seems like a good place to stop. Thanks, BJ.
Yeah. Here's your co-creator info, Nia.
This is super
Something-
rich. There's so many things, there's so many directions we could go here, but I want to kind of leave it open to y'all. What do you want to talk about?
Something that it brings up for me, like in 1313, allowing the rhythms of free choice to flow, playing with the infinite spectrum of possibilities. There's something that's really rich there for me in terms of like, just continuing to uncondition ourselves or decondition ourselves from the idea of a right way and a wrong way. That like our free will and what we are interested in is the point. That like allowing our free energy, our free choice to flow is so much of the point of being an apparent individual. Like our unique love of the creator. That's what we're here for. Like not to do it the right way, because there's not a right way. Our own interest is central.
Yeah. Desire, right? There's another
Yeah.
way of calling it desire. I was thinking about this. I've been, I read some quotes from Buddhism sometimes where, it's said that desire is the source of all suffering. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but how that gets interpreted is, so focus on, the recommendation is, so focus on dissolving your desire, resolve your desire. And I take issue with that, because I think that, desire is just like what this is supporting what you were just saying, BJ. Desire is what creates the universe. Desire is why the universe is here. Desire is, what drives love light. It like literally is the what creates the voltage of love light and intelligent energy. Intelligent energy is desire. It's the same thing. It's like it's the power of the creator to manifest its idea, its infinite idea. Anyway, and I agree with you, BJ, and I think it's a really important point. I think for us to really honor our desire and work with it consciously, which doesn't always mean like manifesting it and trying to get it in reality. It doesn't mean that, but it means like notice it and allow it to like ripen and be a part of your conscious process, which sometimes you can just,
I think the way that desire is the cause of suffering is when desire is misunderstood. Like, I desire this thing, therefore I need to have it. Like there's an idea of a potential future, and that needs to be happening now in order for me to be okay, or whatever. Like that's a misunderstanding. Desire is just a movement of energy, and it points me towards something, but it doesn't need to be manifest in this moment. Yeah, I'm with you. But it's still so powerful and beautiful.
Yeah. Yuri?
When you're speaking about someone's desire, who is this one who is desiring?
The co-creator is desiring.
Or you are desiring. You have a desire.
Who is this me?
That's another good meditation.
Well, and that's why I said co-creator. Because the co-creator, when in this context of this session, when Ross says co-creator, a co-creator is any portion of the infinite undivided one who has selected a desire. And the selection of the desire is what creates a new point of perspective, like Sean was bringing up, the importance of perspective. What is perspective? Well, perspective is like wanting to be in a certain experience, wanting to be in a certain place in space and time, or wanting to explore a certain quality, or I mean, infinity. There's infinity things that you can choose as a perspective, but taking a perspective is co-creatorship. And in truth, there's only one infinite creator, but the concept of co-creator is the concept of logos. And logos, logos is word, right? In Greek, logos is word. And I think what it points to is like the selection of a concept, the selection of an idea, the selection of something specific within all the possible things that could be desired, the selection of one, and then exploring that. And that's co-creatorship. And that's the one who desires.
I would agree about the desire, which is like act of creation. When this desire is about creating something, creating something unique, experience or any item, whatever. Yes, then we are kind of sub logos in this act. But there is another point of this, which is when someone is not connected to the whole, but thinking of its separation, and from this state of being, someone desires something, and I don't think this is an act of creation.
What is it?
What is it? It's creating an illusion. I don't know. Further disconnection from the whole, or serving to, maybe it could be serving to self as well. I don't know.
Yeah. It's kind of confusion, right? Is that maybe another way of saying it? It's confusion. Would you say that's true?
It can be confusion as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, remember, just this, if it's helpful or not, Ross says that the other way of calling the law of free will is the law of confusion. It's not a problem. It's not an error or a mistake in the reality that we are in. It's a feature. In fact, it's the primary feature, is the ability to be confused. It's needed.
Yes, it's free choice to be matching on the way of evolvement, or choosing to play once again here in the third density. It's a free choice. You're welcome. If you choose to play around with desires, which will not some desires are really act of creation, and some desires are just playing around with matter, which will not lead anywhere. And this is what Buddhists were saying when they say that desire is a reason why people suffer. So the desires can be very of different nature.
Yeah. I mean, I feel where I think your question is coming from, and it's a very rich and important point that you're making. And it's the stuff of, how we navigate our spiritual path and evolution and make sense of the world is like, the role of the choices we make and desire and confusion. But I think what occurs to me is that the trick is, how do we judge from here, from the individuated perspective, the relative merits of the pathways that we as co-creators choose? Like, we really just can't know the ultimate impact of our choices and the choices of those around us. Like, for example, like, what if it is true that we're on a planet that is really imbalanced towards souls taking a long time to graduate, repeating cycle after cycle after cycle? What if it takes on average like 10 or more cycles of 75,000 years for souls to graduate third density? That seems like a problem or something. But who knows what kind of experience that's giving the creator? Like, there's got to be some reason for it. Like, God created this all, and so it's just, I think the point I'm trying to make is that, and maybe this is just medicine for me, but like, how can we know? How can we judge what's right or wrong, or what's more or less good or something, or efficient? Or anyway, I don't know if any of this is landing, but I'm trying to lean into like the idea that everything that we experience is a part of the design on purpose, including all the stuff that seems bad. And it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's super hard pill to swallow.
Really quickly, you guys Ra talks about the choice, positive path, negative path. It's all creator. And that was a hard pill for a lot of us to swallow. We're like, what? Moral compass, clearly we're all on the service to others path, like how is that a thing, and then this has been a very like infinite discussion. But the other thing I wanted to point out was, y'all are talking about desire, and Buddhists, the suffering that comes from desire also has to do with attachment. So if you tack that meaning onto the word along with the desire, Buddhists pray for world peace. It's a desire, but there's not an attachment to it that creates the suffering when it doesn't happen. So I just want to throw that tidbit in there.
I was
Right.
going to
Amanda.
mention that too. That we need to separate the word desire into like attachment versus will.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
Amanda.
Okay, let's get back to the stack. So Shang has his hand up, and then Amanda.
So like co-creator, the word co-creator, in order to create, is there a spirit? So like we are mind, body, spirit complexes, in that there's a body portion, a mind portion, and a spirit portion. I think in second density, there's no spirit portion. It's just mind, body complexes. Is the spirit, do you need to have that spirit portion in order to actually create? And that like prior to getting a spirit portion, you're not creating, you're just experiencing, or you're just in it. Like a photon, it's in the universe, it interacts with the universe. Is it a co-creator? Or do you need, is that spirit complex, which and I'm not entirely sure what the spirit complex is. I know the body complex is like the physical matter of the self. The mental complex, I think, is sort of the part that links with like the holographic projection of the universe and links with the laws and like links with like how things work in the universe. And then there's a spirit complex, which is like a shuttle to the creator, which whatever that means. Like, is that part required to be a co-creator? Like, is that the feeling of joy of like being alive or something? I don't know. That's the part that manifests, right? The spirit complex is what does the instant manifestation.
I think you got it. I mean, that's what I would say. I think the spirit complex is what gives us the ability to be co-creator. I mean, I think that, you know, there are second density entities certainly that that do what we would call creation, individual creation. But I think they would have some rudimentary spirit complex at that point. Like, I think they're really close to graduating from second density. And before then, what we would, you know, where the creatorship or the authorship of those first and second density entities comes from is the logos itself. So everything, even photons, have you know, creatorship, have the ability to create. But without the spirit complex, they're sort of borrowing creatorship or authorship from the higher level that they were generated by. That's how I kind of make sense of that question.
Yeah, that's right. Because Ross says graduating from third density is not from second density to third is not like being granted a spirit complex. It's just discovering the spirit complex that's already there. That's right. Okay.
They talk about that with pets. Quo talks about this all the time with graduating second density to third density is basically your pets, cats and dogs especially, dare I say, would they have a name? They have devotion, they have affection, they have suddenly an identity that leads to self-awareness, which leads to that specific love and devotion and affection portion allows the evolution into third density. When Quo talks about when you focus on the love of your pet and that pet then in return is focusing that love on you, that's working towards the graduation to third density. I don't think that first and second density don't have the spirit complex though. I think that's still there as part, everything is part of creator. I don't know if it's said specifically or not, but I feel like second density insects, animals may be existing in a form of mind body spirit complex that's instinctual rather than contemplative. But when they show certain mammals, and we've talked about this before, wolf packs, whale pods, certain usually mammals act in ways of devotion and love with their babies that are more than just instinctual. Insects are more of the primal instinct, just existing and doing what is programmed in their genetic DNA. But that those particular mammals have a very high limbic system, and that's proven by science that technically whales' brains have so much of, and the limbic system means emotion, that their brains are, the part of their brain that is the limbic system is so large that technically certain whales are capable of more love and compassion than we are. Elephants are the other one. So it was whales, elephants, and canines like wolf packs that can evolve straight into third density with so much awareness because they have jobs to protect the pods and the packs. They have an identity within said pack. And in my mind, certain second densities or second density still has a spirit complex. It's just a matter of which second density that leads to the graduation of the third.
Right. Maybe the right word is like everything has a spirit complex. It's just in third density that you realize it's there. Also, dolphins have names for each other. I think that's
Whoa,
been
cool.
shown. They call each other with specific whistles and names.
That is so endearing. I think a part of what happens when we take on a spirit complex or form a spirit complex or realize a spirit complex, become third density, is like, I actually think it ties into the study of the archetypical mind, and it relates to the significator card in the significator position, which is basically where we store our bias. So like to be a creator is to have a bias. It's like, I want to create what I want to create. I have my ideas, and it's different than BJ's. It's different than, it's like my ideas are my ideas. And it's like, it's having a boundary around the infinite biases of everything that could be, and choosing and selecting a subsection of that, and naturally being interested in something. And that's very closely related to having a spirit complex. To becoming inspirited is like my idea. The idea of like an I, an individuation, is bound up in like having a bias, the ability to explore a bias and carry that bias through lifetimes. Like there's something really interesting and mysterious about what is a soul, what is a mind, body, spirit complex? How is it that we store our bias from lifetime to lifetime? Where is it stored? Where is that, how does that take place? Well, I think it relates to the significator portion of our mind, the deep, deep, deep. It's like the deepest structure of mind is the significator. It's the matrix potentiator and significator preceded the veil. These are very, very fundamental portions of mind. And the significator, in my understanding, is how we cultivate and explore and carry our biases, which is basically like, what am I interested in? It's different than what everyone else is interested in the entire creation. Is my bias. We all have that. And somehow it's connected to spirit.
Amanda, did you still want to say something? No? Okay.
I'm good.
I think that's really interesting. Like that kind of brings us back around to looking at desire, as opposed to desire with attachment. But the importance of desire. That's pretty fascinating.
I mean, I think it's the central driving force of evolution, of personal evolution at the level of humans, is desire. Maybe in the whole thing. In a way, I think desire is what drives all of it, all of evolution. And I think desire is another word for the matrix. Matrix of mind, anyway. Will, the conscious mind, the magician. Anyway, that's later. That's for later. Getting ahead of our reading.
Well, speaking of, should we keep reading?
I mean, I think it's a fairly good stopping point. Potentially, there's just a lot that we read already that we haven't really unpacked. But yeah, if we could, if there's no other questions or comments, we can keep reading.
I have a random comment. Have you guys heard of an ET race called the Essassani?
Yeah.
They're like supposedly future humans. Supposedly the outcome of all the ET. I don't know, something about like, what is it? What's the one that was doing the cloning? Zeta Reticuli, who like fucked up their DNA because they cloned too much, so they came to Earth to borrow some human DNA because their bodies were all screwed up. And they're like mostly positive. They're doing it to save their race, and they're like abducting with permission, and that like supposedly their souls are incarnating into human bodies so that they can like basically fix their DNA, and the outcome in the future is Essassani. Anyways, I was reading some book supposedly channeled by an Essassani source, who are in our future, but who knows how time space works in fourth density. But they there's a I remember in one of the sessions, Don's like, hey, are there other universes? And I was like, we don't have evidence. The only way you can know, like, imagine you're living on an island. The only way you know if there's another island is if someone comes from that other island and says, hey, I'm from another island. And Ra says, that's happened to us. And the Essassani also talk about these beings they met who travel between universes, who appear just as these strange balls of semi-matter that don't really fully exist. And they tell the Essassani stories of other universes. And one of the other universes that these balls of whatever weird balls have traveled to is this weird inverted universe where their solar system, so we have like a sun and planets rotating, but they're in their universe, they have a sun which is in a giant hollowed out ball of space. So it's just like the space between stars is just like completely like solid, and there are these little hollow spheres with suns in the middle. And like in that universe, there's like the beings are these like little balls that roll around on the ground with like little sucker feet. Anyways, I
Did you
just thought
mention this
that was-
before? This feels familiar. Did you mention this concept before?
I don't know if I don't know,
Okay.
but this just came to mind when this talking about like multiple universes existing. I've always been unclear if, I guess like there's no real sequence, like there's no such things as sequences when it comes to like when there's no space and time, right? Because I always wonder like, are universes sequential or are they parallel, or like, I don't know. These are limitations of the third density mind, I guess.
Or not, or
Nassim
maybe not even.
Haramein-
They're just limitations of like being in the creation and not being no longer being in the infinite club of the one infinite creator. Like you're part of like infinity. You're outside of the, or you're in the mystery. You're not it or something. Anyway.
Nassim Haramein says it's like nesting dolls, that the universes are nesting in layers. And that one kind of made sense to me. I liked that visual because we are talking about infinity, and it's like, just from what we can actually see in third density existence of our universe is just, and then think of that infinitely nested, it's like, woo.
Yeah. Well, and the nature of the construct, whatever it is, the first distortion, however it is that the one infinite creator gave itself the opportunity to be aware and then create a universe, is a construct. It has some structure to it. It has some describable geometry, or it has some, anyway, I call it a construct. And that the construct is like holographic is a really key to understanding the scales of infinity, the scales of like if the entire universe is a part of this construct, and galaxies are part of it, and suns are a part of it, and we're a part of it, but it's all this holographic. Maybe having a hard time putting words to it, but if we were in the Secret of Light study group, I'd be like, the cube sphere is the construct. The cube sphere is the construct. It is the way that God creates everything, and it's fractal and holographic. And so anyway, that's part of the power of this construct, is that it's able to function across all scales, and it's the same construct. It's the same geometry. It has the same dynamics.
Doesn't Ross say a black hole is the manifestation, was it 7th or 8th density in physical, in our reality? So that's like the real.
I remember something like that. I don't remember exactly how they talked about it, but I remember them saying like it's the completion of the octave, right?
So that's the real nature of reality, is the inside of it. It's a singularity. And everything else
maybe.
is the holograph.
Mm-hmm.
Which also is what like physicists have said. It's like it's a holograph on the edge of a black hole or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about the piece that Ra says where they say, you know, the first three distortions are simultaneous. Where do you guys remember what I'm talking about? Like they're not, they're in the first three distortions, we haven't gotten to space and time yet. Say it again. Where was it?
It precedes space and time. Yeah,
It
yeah,
prec-
yeah.
Trying to find it.
1311 says the step says you call them are at the point of question, simultaneous and infinite. Is that what you're talking about?
That's it. Simultaneous, you know, so that's interesting because we call them the first distortion, the second distortion, the third distortion. So we tend to, like, of course, think that there's you know, there's an order to them,
time.
but in
Yeah.
fact they're not. They all happen. They're all simultaneous somehow. That seems really important.
Yeah.
It's like a chicken and egg thing, right? Like in order for space and time to exist, you need perspective, you need manyness, you need things to look at each other. And I think it's useful to think about them as first, second, and third, but I think they are, like, in a way you can't separate them. And Ra's just helping us understand it better by separating the concept. That's my understanding.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense. Totally. It's kind of like the mind, the body, and the spirit. You can't separate them. You can't, you know, for us, you couldn't like take out the spirit. They're not separable, but they do have different qualities. And so it's helpful to, like, yeah, have different names for them. Oh, I remember what I was going to say before, Shang. You had said, like, something about, you know, being a part of space and time versus the creator who is outside of space and time. Well, what came to mind is that Ra is also outside of space and time. Like, you can be in the creation.
He said outside our space and time. He didn't say he was outside space and time. I went back and looked that up because we talked about that. I was like, wait, is Ra really? And I looked up the quote, and he specifically said, "We are not a part of your space and time."
Oh, interesting.
Which is
Okay, that's
different.
important.
Because, like, they're in sixth density space and time, which is a different nature than third density space and time.
Right.
But as long as you have to be in some sort of space and time to relate to other things.
Right.
I understand.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. I'd never realized the distinction there. I just sort of assumed that they were kind of beyond time specifically, and they could, because they say they can be with us in any of our time space, but maybe that's because they're sixth density and they're not in third density. And that's all that means.
I think so.
I thought they were in the spirit world. But I guess
Space
not.
and time exists in the spirit world too, I think. It's just different. Well, then you're in time space. Which means time and space still exist.
True. True. Good point. Good point.
Which is why Ross says it has difficulty with our numbers, because their time space and space time is different than third densities.
Yeah. I imagine there's some massive translation that has to happen for them to interact with us with our numbering system. And
because they're
I'm
still
telling
growing.
you though, I have that too. It feels actually true that I somehow have trouble with the way numbers and time work here. Like, truly, that seems true. I'm like, nope, doesn't make sense. Somehow, nope.
My understanding of time is that time measures change and growth and evolution, and Ra's still doing that. So they are still in some sort of sixth density space time or time space.
yeah. Yeah. When they even give a number, they even, like, and who knows how useful it is, but they give a number for how long sixth density is, and kind of like,
in our times, in our
right,
terms.
right, in our
Which
terms.
I thought about it, was like, yeah, it sounds like a lot in our terms, but maybe to them it's like the equivalent of 75,000 years.
I think so. I
our
think
time.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I think. I think that they're, sixth density, all the higher densities have a much longer time span in our time, but I think experientially they're relatable. It's a relatively similar experience of a density.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Like I've heard a thing, I don't know if this is actually true. Nia, you may know, you seem to know these kinds of things, but that like the like number of heartbeats, something like that. Like if you count the lifespan of a hummingbird as opposed to a human, as opposed to an elephant kind of thing, like we have very different lifespans, but similar or much more similar like number of heartbeats. And that just seems like a similar kind of parallel. Like if you count it by something else, you count it by I don't know what the equivalent metaphor would be, but that just makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
Well, even taking into account a fly, like this is something that I think most of us have seen some video at some point in time, that the perspective of the fly, and why to us they're super fast, but they're just sitting there and they look up and they're like, oh, this ginormous hand is swatting towards me, and it looks like slow motion when we're swatting as fast as we can to get this fly. And to them, their perspective is it's slow motion. They're like, I've got all the time in the world to get out of the way, you're never going to catch me, and we're all still third density here, like, or their second density, but we're somewhat overlapping the same space-time and time-space, but it's the time of that space is different, even though we're coexisting. So yes, that's a very valid point, PJ. It's perspective again. And that goes back to thought forms, because in fourth, fifth, sixth density, thought raw can be anywhere in the galaxy, anywhere in the universe with a thought. And this also gets into the paradigm of what is the word? Shang, you probably know this. It was, I don't think it's quantum physics, it's the time branches, that every decision, every choice that's ever been made has its own branch of reality. Help me out. I know you know what I'm talking about. But like the
parallel universes, branching universes. Yeah, you're describing it right.
So that's something that our current existing space-time third density minds of not understanding have a hard time grasping. That's mind-blowing, paradigm shifting, trying to understand in the density of non-understanding. So this just keeps going and keeps unfolding. But I'm really proud of us. I think we've got a pretty good grasp on it, considering that we will never grasp it in our current existence. So in a way, I mean, like, we could sit here and chew on this for our entire lifetime, and many physicists and scientists, quantum physicists, they all have, and they are. And there's still so many conflicting arguments around it. And then we get into the Russellian, which, that throws everything we've been taught out the window, and then they're still discovering everything is it's pretty amazing. I think we're doing a pretty good job, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Nia. I think so too. And I want to just return, we've got a few minutes left, and one of the points I want to kind of close with from my perspective is like, there's this thing called the direct path, and BJ, I'll invite you to speak to it if there's anything you want to say, but there's this, there's this spiritual set of practices or perspective called the direct path. And this is what Rupert Spira, which BJ and I are BJ mostly talks about, And it's like, what's the most important, like if you want to put yourself on a spiritual path, like there's so many things you can do. There's so many choices. There's so many pathways up the mountain, right? There's so many ways that you can pursue a spiritual path. And then some people have called this thing the direct path, which is like basically like directly investigating the first distortion, like developing a relationship, a living relationship for yourself with the first thing, the very first thing, the very like foundation of the creation, and that's awareness. So like learning how to like distinguish what is awareness. In my experience, what is awareness, and how to like strengthen that connection is I'm probably doing a horrible job describing it, but that's how I understand the direct path. Is that's the meditative practice, is just to learn. And it's so subtle. It seems so simple, but it's so subtle that it's like it takes a while. BJ, did you want to say anything else? No. Anyway, I'm saying that because I'm trying to, like, we're in such deep waters here metaphysically, and these
I
are
do want to
such
say something about it.
abstract concepts that I just wanted to bring it back into a tangible thing, which is like, okay, the first distortion, awareness. You guys, it's not far away. It's not like some, like at the beginning of the Big Bang, like, awareness was relevant. It's right here, right now. It's what underpins this whole experience we're having, is awareness. It's why we're able to do this. And so that's what I wanted to say. PJ, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, there was a question recently on the threads about like what might we study next, and something that is really present for me is this book, Being Myself. Like this is exactly what Aaron's talking about, and this is by Rupert Spira. It's like a little baby book. It doesn't take very much to read, and it's very accessible, and plus he's so cute. He's such a dear. But it's like so accessible, and so like it's a powerful explanation of the direct path and finding the experience of being aware. So this is something that I am thinking that we might study.
Let's
What
do
are
it.
some
I
of
love
the
it.
core things that it talks about? Just like, so I know a little bit more about that book.
It's finding awareness in our direct experience simply through the experience of being myself. Like there's like, you can strip down all of your experience and everything changes, but at the bottom of everything there's the experience of being myself that never changes. And since it never changes, it becomes transparent to us, and we aren't aware of it. It's like a fish in water. And so it's just a way of calling forth that experience of being myself as a really profound way of being aware of being aware.
It's like coming in touch with like your higher self, and almost
Yeah.
like distilling the essence of you. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, except
Yeah.
it's beyond the higher self, because it's beyond space
Sorry.
and time.
The self totality, whatever. Mind,
Yeah.
body, spirit totality.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and another fascinating portion of it is that it's actually the most direct way that we can know the law of one. Because once you come in contact with what we call awareness, and we realize that, oh, everything that I could ever experience is all happening within my awareness. And you start to realize, like, wait a second, that my awareness is actually the same awareness. There's no qualities to it. It's the same awareness that we all share. Like it's the direct pathway into knowing the law of one, because we can, again, I'm still a very beginner to this practice, but once we get a purchase on it, we realize, like, wait a second, it's not like my awareness is different than BJ's and Shang's and Yuri's. It's like it's the same stratum that,
Yeah.
it's where we're one. It's the direct way to kind of investigate the law of one. It's pretty cool. And he's a great teacher. Very simple, very direct. There's no heavy metaphysics in it.
Yeah.
That does sound like a good bite size. I like your suggestion with that, BJ, where it was like we've had such a heavy one. I mean, law of one is
Yeah.
heavy, and then we have secret. That was heavy, and that's
Yeah.
headache inducing and deep diving. And then I like that because it sounds like, and I don't know the work, but it sounds like that ties into exactly the message of the law of one. We are all the infinite creator. And what Quo continues to talk about, know yourself, accept yourself, realize that
Become
you
the
are,
creator.
become the
Yeah.
creator. Yeah. So that sounds like it ties right into the main message. I love it.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks, y'all. We'll pick up. Did you do, or does anyone remember which the last one we read was?
Yeah. We read 15. So our
15.
next one is
Great. So we'll just
16.
pick up again next week where we left off, and we'll continue. And we can rewind a little bit if we need to. But thanks everyone for
There's Kristen.
your awareness.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate everyone's insight and wisdom and participation.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Nia.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Mwah.